I didn't find out because I saw a ghost. It was because the hotel system reported that I had left my room while I was still standing inside. A message popped up on my phone. Very short, very ordinary. It basically said that the sensor detected someone entering and leaving my room, requesting confirmation. I read it and looked around. My suitcase was still in the corner of the room. My coat was still hanging on the hook. The door was still locked from the inside. I hadn't gone anywhere. I replied that I was in my room. A little while later, the receptionist messaged back, apologizing for the system error. If that were all, I probably would have let it go. But a few minutes later, I opened the hallway camera feed, and I saw a person standing in front of my room door. The person was wearing the exact same shirt I was wearing. Their build was the same as mine. Their posture was also the same. I stared at the image for a long time. Then I looked down at myself, and for the first time on this trip, I had a very unsettling thought. Someone might have left this room, but not through the door. I was staying in a small hotel near the train station, the kind of hotel where all the rooms looked the same. Long hallways, white lights, nothing to remember. I chose it because it was cheap, convenient, and I didn't need to ask any questions. The first day went by very normally. Checked in, unpacked, taken a hot shower, eat something I bought at the convenience store, checked my phone until I was sleepy. Everything was typical of a short business trip. The trouble started in the bathroom. I was brushing my teeth in front of the mirror. The fluorescent light above was making a very soft noise, the kind you wouldn't normally notice, but in the quiet of the night, you hear it clearly. I was tired. My face in the mirror didn't look like my usual self. My skin was gray, my eyes sunken. I looked more like someone who hadn't slept enough than someone who had traveled. I bent down to rinse my mouth. When I looked up, I felt like the mirror wasn't keeping up with me. Not because it was blurry, not because it was shaking, but because for a very brief moment, the reflection in the mirror remained in the same position. Just one breath, but enough for me to realize. I stood still, staring straight into the mirror. Then the reflection moved again, as usual. The feeling wasn't fear. It was more like when you see someone behind you in a car window, then realize it's just a reflection, but your heart still beats a little faster. I told myself it was just fatigue. I turned off the water. I turned off the bathroom light. When the light went out, for a very brief moment, I felt like there was still someone standing behind me. I turned around immediately. No one was there. It was just a small, clean, empty bathroom. I went to the main room. The air conditioner was running. The bed was neatly made. The smell of freshly laundered linens. Nothing unusual. My phone vibrated. A message from the hotel system. It said there was movement in my room and requested confirmation. I looked around the room again. I was here. I hadn't gone anywhere. I replied that I hadn't left the room. The receptionist apologized, saying it might be a sensor malfunction. A very typical service response. Polite, concise, and not intrusive. If it had ended there, I would have forgotten about it. But out of curiosity, I opened the hallway camera feed. The image was quite clear. The hallway was empty, the lights were on, the carpet was clean. Then a frame appeared. A person was standing in front of my room door. The person had their back to the camera. He was wearing the exact same jacket as me. I remember that jacket very clearly because it was the one I wore all day. I looked down at myself. I was wearing it. The person in the video was standing very still. No knocking, no turning around immediately, just standing there, as if waiting. I didn't think about ghosts. The first thing I thought of was a system error. Duplicate data, old video, someone else wearing the same clothes. But the feeling in my chest wouldn't listen to reason. Because of that posture, the way that person slightly tilted their shoulder, the way the weight was concentrated on one leg, that's the posture I usually stand in when waiting for someone to open the door. I took a screenshot and sent it to the front desk. They replied that they didn't see that segment in their system. I looked at my phone again. The video was still on my phone, but it didn't exist in the hotel system. At that moment, I wasn't scared. It wasn't that there was someone who looked like me, but something in this hotel was registering my presence in a way I couldn't control. I wasn't sure if that system was tracking me or tracking someone else who looked very much like me. After the camera incident, I could no longer sleep normally. Not the kind of restlessness where you eventually pass out from exhaustion, but the kind where you lie still for a long time, eyes open, listening to every small sound in the room. The air conditioner cycling on and off, the pipes in the walls making a soft knock now and then, the elevator stopping somewhere far away and then moving again. All of those familiar hotel sounds no longer felt reassuring. They felt like a checklist I had to monitor, just to convince myself that I was still in a place that could be called normal. I left my phone face down on the table because I didn't want to see the screen light up again, but I still reached over and touched it a few times, just to make sure it was still there, still mine, still in the exact place I had left it. I checked the door more often than necessary, not because I believed someone was trying to break in, but because I had a very clear sense that something was paying attention to this room in a way I could not control. At times, I stood close to the door, pressing my ear near it, trying to tell whether the faint sounds I heard came from the hallway or were just echoes inside my own head. There was a moment when I was almost certain I heard breathing on the other side of the door. Not loud, not rushed, just steady and very close, as if someone had been standing there long enough to stop being in a hurry. When I stayed completely still, the sound disappeared, and that didn't make me feel relieved. It only made me more uneasy, because I couldn't tell whether it had left or simply stopped. The next morning, I went down to the front desk and spoke the way someone would when dealing with a technical issue. I didn't mention the mirror, I didn't talk about the feeling, I didn't bring up the sounds. I only asked again about the camera and the mismatch between my device and the hotel system. The staff member looked at the screen, typed a few things, and answered in a smooth, practiced tone, saying the system was old, that it sometimes failed to sync, that these things could happen, and that I didn't need to worry. The way she spoke didn't sound like someone thinking through an answer. It sounded like someone repeating a sentence she had used many times before. She didn't ask what I had seen in the video. She didn't seem surprised. She didn't want to go deeper. She just ended the conversation as quickly as she could. That was when I started to feel that I wasn't the first person to experience something like this, and that thought was colder than if she had acted shocked. When I returned to my room, I began paying attention to small details on purpose, not because I was certain someone was entering my room, but because I wanted proof for myself, something to tell me I wasn't imagining everything. I placed my slippers neatly against the wall, hung my jacket so the inner label faced outward, and put my water bottle in a very specific spot on the desk. Small habits I knew well, because I did them almost without thinking. That evening when I came back, everything was still in place. The slippers hadn't moved, the jacket hadn't shifted, the bottle was exactly where I remembered leaving it. For a few minutes, I truly felt relieved, and I started to think that maybe I had let a minor technical glitch push my thoughts too far. I took a shower. Hot water, steam fogging the mirror. Everything felt the same as always. But when I stepped back into the main room, I felt something very clear that I couldn't explain with smell, temperature, or anything measurable. The room no longer felt the way it had when I left, not because anything had been disturbed, but because the air felt used, like someone else had been here before me. The same feeling you get when you walk into a meeting room and know people were sitting there for a long time, even though they're gone and left no obvious trace. I stood in the middle of the room for a few seconds, just to sit with that feeling. Then my phone lit up in my hand. No vibration, no alert, no notification. The screen opened straight into the camera app. I saw the ceiling angle of my room, and in that frame I saw myself standing near the door, with my back to the camera, in a posture that felt very familiar, very much like the way I stand when waiting for someone to open a door. I looked from the phone screen to the door in real life. The door was empty. No one was standing there, but in the video there was someone. That person didn't move, didn't knock, didn't turn around, just stood there, as if waiting in a stretch of time I wasn't allowed to see directly. I took a step toward the door in real life. The person in the video didn't move. I stopped. That person stayed exactly the same. At that moment, I understood clearly that this wasn't a reflection and wasn't a delay. It was another moment recorded in the same room, and the system was showing it to me as if it were happening right now. I closed the app and set my phone down on the table. My hand shook slightly, not from panic, but because a very unpleasant thought had started to form. If I kept reporting these things to the hotel, if I kept talking about them, I would slowly become the guest with problems. And once that happened, nothing I said would be treated as fully reliable anymore, even if it was real. That night I left the bedside light on. I pulled a chair up against the door, not to block it, but so I would hear something if the door opened. I lay on the bed, eyes open, trying to stay awake long enough to be sure I wasn't dreaming. Very late I heard a faint metallic sound, like the door handle being turned slowly and carefully. Not the way someone would force it, but the way someone tests it, as if checking how the door would respond. The handle moved just enough for me to clearly see it shift, but not enough to make a loud noise. I stared at the door. I didn't move. I didn't cough. I didn't turn over, because in my head one thought was very clear. If whatever was out there knew that I was awake, it would not stop at just testing the handle. After a while, the handle stopped moving. There were no footsteps walking away, no elevator sounds, no sign that anyone had left the hallway, just a thick, heavy silence, as if the room itself was holding on to something I couldn't see. In the morning, I checked the door carefully. There were no pry marks, no scratches, no physical signs to prove that anything had happened during the night, but the feeling didn't go away.
and I began to understand that the problem was no longer whether someone wanted to enter my room. It was that something had started to treat this room as a place it had the right to appear in, and I was no longer sure that I was the only one who could be considered the owner of this space. After that night, I stopped trusting feelings. I started trusting evidence. Not because I wanted to, but because the room began leaving things behind that I could no longer explain away. In the morning, I woke up in a strange position. I wasn't lying where I usually did. I was shifted to one side of the bed, as if I had made room for someone during the night. The blanket was pulled toward the edge, not the way it moves when you turn in your sleep, but the way it looks when it's been dragged, slowly, on purpose. I sat up and looked around. Nothing was overturned. Nothing was broken. There were no signs of a break-in. But the feeling that someone had been there was stronger than before. It wasn't vague. It felt like walking into a meeting room where people had been sitting there for a long time. Even after they leave, the air still feels occupied. I went into the bathroom. The mirror wasn't fogged. I hadn't showered yet. But on the glass there was a faint smear,